Hello, and welcome to another Read With Me session. I'm yours truly, Isabel Bedell, and I'm here to read with you another amazing episode or another chapter or another law of the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John C. Maxwell. It's an amazing, amazing book. If you have not been able to read it, make sure to get the book. It's amazing. And make sure to get the 25th anniversary one. This is a 10th anniversary one, and one of our amazing BIC members mentioned that there's so much that he's added into the 25th edition, so make sure to get that one, not the 10th. I'm surprised that I didn't even see the 25th when I ordered it from Amazon, but look for the 25th. Okay. All right, in this particular episode, we're going to be talking about the law of sacrifice. This is chapter 18. A leader must give up to go up. Why does an individual step forward to lead other people? For every person, the answer is different. A few do it to survive. Some do it to make money. Many desire to build a business or organization, and others do it because they want to change the world. And that was the reason for Martin Luther King Jr. Seeds of greatness. King's leadership ability began to emerge when he was in college. He had always been a good student. In high school, he skipped 9th grade. And when he took a college entrance exam as a junior, his scores were high enough that he decided to skip his entire senior year and enroll in Morehouse College in Atlanta. At the age of 18, he received his ministerial license. At 19, he was ordained and received his bachelor's degree in sociology. And King continued his education at Krosner Seminary in Pennsylvania. And while he was there, two significant things happened. He heard a message about the life and teachings of Mahatma Gandhi, which forever marked him and put in motion his serious study of the Indian leader. He also emerged as a leader among his peers and was elected president of the senior class. And from there, he studied for his PhD at Boston University. It was also during his time that he married Coretta Scott. Seeds of sacrifice. King accepted his first pastorate in Montgomery, Alabama, at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in 1954 and settled into family life when his first child was born the next year in November. But that peace didn't last long. Less than a month later, Rosa Parks refused to relinquish her seat on a bus to a white passenger and was arrested. Local African-American leaders arranged a one-day boycott of the transit system to protest her arrest and the city's segregation policy. When it was successful, they decided to create the Montgomery Improvement Association, the MIA, to continue the boycott. And already recognized as a leader in the community, King was unanimously elected president of the newly formed organization. And for the next year, King led African-American community leaders in a boycott with the goal of changing the system. The MIA negotiated with the city leaders and demanded courteous treatment of African Americans by bus operators, first come, first served seating for all bus riders, and employment of African American bus drivers. And while the boycott was on, community leaders organized carpools, raised funds to support the boycott financially, and rallied and mobilized the community with sermons and coordinated legal challenges with the NAACP. Finally, in November 1956, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the laws allowing segregated seating on buses. King and the other leaders were successful. The world was beginning to change. The world was beginning to change. The Montgomery bus boycott was a major step in the American civil rights movement, and it's easy to see that was gained as a result of it. But King also began paying a personal cost for it. Soon after the boycott began, King was arrested for minor traffic violation. A bomb was thrown into his porch, and he was indicted on a charge of being party to a conspiracy to hinder and prevent the operation of business without just or legal cause, and King was emerging as a leader, but he was also paying a price for it. The price keeps getting higher. Each time King climbed higher and moved forward in leadership for this cause of civil rights, the greater the price he paid for it. His wife, Coretta Scott King, remarked in My Life with Martin Luther King, the book that she wrote. And one night our phone would ring and someone would pour a string of obscene epithets. Frequently, the call ended with a threat to kill us if we didn't get out of town. But in spite of all the danger, the chaos of our private lives, I felt inspired and almost elated. King did some great things as a leader. He met with presidents. He delivered rousing speeches that are considered some of the most outstanding examples of oration in American history. And he led over 250,000 people in a peaceful march on Washington, D.C. He received the Nobel Peace Prize, and he did create change in this country. But the law of sacrifice demands that the greater the leader, the more he must give up. During the same period, King was arrested many times and jailed on many occasions. He was stoned, stabbed, and physically attacked. His house was bombed, and yet his vision and his influence continued to increase. Ultimately, he sacrificed everything he had, but what he gave up, he parted with willingly. In his last speech, delivered the night before he was assassinated in Memphis, he said, "I don't know what will happen to me now, but we've got some difficult days ahead. But it doesn't matter to me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I won't mind like anybody else. I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but it's not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will." And he's allowed me to go up to the mountaintop, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. The next day, he paid the ultimate price of sacrifice. King's impact was profound. He influenced millions of people to peacefully stand up against a system and society that fought to exclude them. The United States has changed for the better because of his leadership. Sacrifice is the heart of leadership. There is a common misperception among the people who aren't leaders that leadership is all about position, perks, and power that came from rising in an organization. Many people want to climb up to the corporate ladder because they believe that freedom, power, wealth are the prizes waiting at the top. The life of a leader can look glamorous to people on the outside, but the reality is that leadership requires sacrifice. A leader must give up to go up. In recent years, we've observed more than our share of leaders who used and abused the organization for their personal benefit, and the resulting corporate scandals that came because of their greed and selfishness. The heart of good leadership is sacrifice. The heart of good leadership is sacrifice. If you desire to become the best leader that you can be, then you need to be willing to make sacrifices in order to lead well. And if that is your desire, then here are some things that you need to know about the law of sacrifice. Number one, there is no success without sacrifice. Every person who has achieved anything in their life, any success, has made sacrifices to do so. And many working people dedicate 4 more years and pay thousands of dollars to attend college to get the tools they'll need before embarking on their career. Athletes sacrifice countless hours in the gym and on the practice field, preparing themselves to perform at a high level. Parents give up much of their free time and sacrifice their resources in order to do a good job raising their children. Philosophers, poet Ralph Waldo Emerson observed, "For everything you have missed, you have gained something else. And for everything that you have gained, you lose something else." Life is a series of trades, one thing for another. Leaders must give up to go up. That's true of every leader, regardless of the profession. Talk to leaders and you will find that they have made repeated sacrifice. Effective leaders sacrifice much that is good in order to dedicate themselves to what is best. That's the way the law of sacrifice works. Leaders are often asked to give up more than others. The heart of leadership is putting others ahead of yourself. It's doing what is best for the team. For the rest, I believe that leaders have to give up their rights. As Gerald Brooks, leadership speaker and pastor, says, when you become a leader, you lose the right to think about yourself. Visually, it looks like this. Interesting. As you rise in leadership, responsibilities increase and the rights decrease. And when you have no responsibilities, you can do pretty much anything you want. Once you take on responsibility, you start experiencing limitations in what you can do. The more responsibility you accept, the fewer options that you have. Digital chairman and chief executive Robert Palmer said in an interview, "In my model of management, there's very little wiggle room. If you want a management job, then you have to accept the responsibility and accountability that goes with it." He is really talking about the cost of leadership. Leaders must be willing to give up more than the people they lead. For every person, the nature of sacrifice may be different. Everyone who leads up to other opportunities, some have to give up beloved hobbies, and many give up aspects of their personal lives. Some, like King, give their actual lives, and the circumstances are different from person to person, but the principle doesn't change. Leadership means sacrifice. Number 3, you must keep giving up to stay up. Most people are willing to acknowledge that sacrifices are necessary early in a leadership career in order to make progress, and they'll take an undesirable territory to make a name for themselves. They'll move their family to a less desirable city to accept a better position. They'll take a temporary cut in pay for greater opportunities and for advancement. The problem for leaders comes when they think they have earned the right to stop making sacrifices, but in leadership, sacrifice is an ongoing process, not a one-time payment. And if leaders have to give up to go up, then they have to give up more, even more, to stay up. If leaders have to give up to go up, then they have to give up even more to stay up. Have you ever considered how infrequently sports teams have back-to-back championship seasons? The reason is simple. If a leader can win one championship with his team, he often assumes he can duplicate the results the next year by doing the same things, and he becomes reluctant to making additional sacrifices in the off season to prepare for what is often an even greater challenge the next year. But today's success is the greatest threat to tomorrow's success. Today's success is the greatest threat to tomorrow's success. And what gets a team to the top isn't what keeps it there. The only way to stay up is to give up more. Leadership success requires continual change and constant improvement and ongoing sacrifice. When I look back at my career, I recognize that there has always been a cost involved in moving forward. That's been true for me monetarily with every career change except one. When I accepted my first job, our family income decreased because my position paid less than my wife, Margaret, was making as a school teacher. She had to give up that job for us to relocate for my new position. Years later, when I accepted my director's job at headquarters in Marion, Indiana, I once again took a pay cut. In 1981, I left that headquarters job to take a third pastoral position, which I accepted without even knowing what the salary would be. It was even lower. When the board members who offered the job said they were surprised that I took it without even knowing what it paid, I said, if I do the job well, I believe the salary will take care of itself. And in 1995, when I finally left church leadership after a 26-year career to teach and resource people full-time, I gave up a salary altogether. Why would I do that? Because I knew it would enable me to have a greater influence and fulfill a larger vision. And anytime the step is right, a leader shouldn't hesitate to make a sacrifice. Anytime the step is right, a leader shouldn't hesitate to make a sacrifice. The higher the level of leadership, the greater the sacrifice. Have you ever been part of an auction? It's an exciting experience. An item comes up for bid and everyone in the room gets excited. When the bidding doors open, lots of people jump in and take part. But as the prices go up higher and higher, what happens? There are fewer and fewer bidders. When the price is low, everybody bids. In the end, only one person is willing to pay the high price that the item actually cost. It's the same in leadership. The higher you go, the more it's going to cost you. And it doesn't matter what kind of leadership career you pick. You will have to make sacrifices. You will have to go up to go up. You will have to give up to go up. What's the highest level a person can go in leadership? In the United States, it's the presidency. Some people say the president is the most powerful leader in the world, and more than any other single person, his words and actions make an impact, not just on the people of the United States, but around the world. Think about what people must give up to reach the office of president. First, they must learn to lead. Then they have to pay a lot of dues, usually years and even decades in lower leadership positions. And some, like Ulysses S. Grant and Eisenhower, spent an entire career in military service before seeking elected office. And once they have paid their dues and decide to run for presidency, every aspect of their prior life goes under the microscope. Nothing is off limits. It's the end of their personal privacy. When they are elected president, the time is no longer their own. Every statement they make is scrutinized. Every decision they make is questioned. Their family is under tremendous pressure. And as a matter of course, the president must make decisions that mean life or death for others. Even after they leave office, retired presidents will spend the rest of their lives in that company of Secret Service agents who protect them from bodily harm. And that is a price not many people are willing to pay. Standing on others' shoulders. There can be no success without sacrifice. And anytime you see success, you can be sure someone made sacrifice to make it possible. And as a leader, if you sacrifice, even if you don't witness the success, you can be sure that someone in the future will benefit from what you have given. That's what's certainly true for Martin Luther King Jr. He did not live to see most of the benefits of his sacrifice, but many others have. One such a person was African-American girl born in segregated Birmingham, Alabama in 1954, a precocious child. She followed the news of the day, including civil rights struggles. A neighbor recalls that she was always interested in politics because as a little girl, she used to call me and say things like, "Did you see what Bull Connor, a racist city commissioner, did today?" She was just a little girl and she did that all the time. I would have to read the newspaper thoroughly because I wouldn't even know what she was talking about. Though she had an interest in the current events, her passion with music, perhaps her attraction to music, was inevitable. Her mother and grandmother played the piano. She began taking piano lessons from her grandmother at the age of 3 and recognized her as a prodigy. Music consumed her growing up years, and even her given name was inspired by music. Her parents named her Condoleezza from the musical notation Condoleezza, which means with sweetness. Condoleezza Rice is a product of generations of sacrifice. Her grandfather, John Wesley Rice, the son of slaves, was determined to get an education, and according to Condoleezza Rice, saved up his cotton for tuition. He attended the college Stillman in Tulsa, Alabama, and after graduating, he became a Presbyterian minister. That was no small accomplishment for a Black man in the South in the 1920s. He set the course for the family, whose members were determined to become the best that they could be at whatever they did. And Granddaddy Rice passed his love for education down to his son, also named John, who in turn passed it down to Condoleezza. His mother's side of the family was equally industrious and focused on education. Coy Blacker, a Stanford professor and friend of Rice, commented, "I don't know too many American families, period, who can claim that not only are their parents college educated, but their grandparents are college educated, and all their cousins and aunts and uncles are college educated, sacrificing to be the very best." Rice received a broad education at school and at home. She read extensively. She studied French, she took ballet classes, she learned the intricacies of football and basketball from her father, who, besides being a pastor, was a high school guidance counselor and a part-time coach. And during the summers when the family went to Denver so that the parents could take graduate courses, she practiced figure skating. But her heart was set on music. While other children were out playing, she was studying and practicing piano. Her schedule often was grueling. And after the family moved to Denver, she was 13. She worked harder and made more sacrifices. She was very, very disciplined. And to be able to compete in both figure skating and piano competition, she would get up at 4:30 in the morning to fit everything in. One of her teachers commented that there was a core of her that revealed that she knew what she wanted and was willing to make sacrifices. And I think her mind, they were not sacrifices, but things to do that were necessary to keep her goals. And her parents supported her fully and were willing to make the sacrifices for her as well to assist her in her goals. As a pianist, they took out a $13,000 loan in 1969 to buy her a used Steinway grand piano. Rice graduated early from high school and went to the University of Denver with the intention of earning a degree in music and becoming a professional concert pianist. It was something she had made sacrifices her entire life to do, but after her sophomore year, she attended the Aspen Music Festival and came to a realization. As hard as she had worked, she might not make it to the top. She observed, "I met 11-year-olds who could play from sight what had taken me all year to learn, and I thought I'm maybe going to end up playing piano bar or playing Nordstrom, but I'm not going to end up playing at Carnegie Hall." Giving up to go up. Rice knew that if she was going to reach her personal potential, it would not be in music. So she made a sacrifice a few people in her position would be willing to make. She dropped her music major. Her identity had been entirely wrapped in music, but she was willing to strike out in a new direction. She began searching for a new field. She found it in international politics. She was drawn like a magnet to the Russian culture and the Soviet government. For the next 2 years, she immersed herself in her courses, did extensive outside reading, and learned the Russian language. She had found her niche, and she was still willing to pay the price to go to the highest level. And after graduating with her bachelor's degree, she went on to Notre Dame to get her master's degree. She then returned to the University of Denver and earned her PhD at the age of 26. And when she received an offer for a fellowship at Stanford, she jumped on it. A few months later, she was recruited to become a member of the university's faculty, and she arrived. Most people would have been happy if the rest of the story played out something like publish a few articles, then wrote a book or two, earn a tenure, and eventually settle into a comfortable life in the academic community. Not Rice. True, she did carve out a place for herself at Stanford, and it was in an environment that she loved. She enjoyed the intellectual stimulation. She was a talented teacher who found teaching and consoling students highly rewarding. She even became an avid fan of the university sports team. She thrived and received one award after another. She spent a year at the Pentagon in an advisory position with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She called it a reality check and practical experience that informed her teaching and writing. She was quickly made an associate professor. Rice biographer Antonia Felix writes, Condi found her passions in Soviet studies and teaching, and her life at Stanford was rich on many levels. She juggled classes, advising, research writing, playing the piano, weight training, exercising, dating, and even gluing herself to the television for 12-hour football watching marathons. Rice was living an ideal life. She was making the most of her talents. She had great influence, and she was helping to shape the next generation of leaders and thinkers. But then in 1989, the White House called. She was invited to accept a position on the National Security Council as the director of Soviet and East European affairs, and she took a leave of absence from Stanford, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions ever. She was President George W. Bush primary advisor on the Soviet Union as the government disintegrated. And she helped in creating the policy for the unification of Germany. It made her one of the world's experts on the subject. She returned to Stanford after 2 years in Washington, and it wasn't an easy decision. Rice remarked, "It felt kind of hard to keep an academic career intact if you don't come back in about 2 years. But I think of myself as an academic first. That means that if you want to keep some coherence and integrity in your career." Back at Stanford, she possessed an even greater clout. In 2 years, she was made a full professor, and at the age of 38 months later, she was asked to become a provost, a position that had never been held by an African American by a woman or even anyone so young. All her predecessors were at least 20 years older than her that took that position, and for good reason. The provost is not only the chief academic officer of the university, but is also responsible for a $1.5 billion budget. And Rice was being asked to handle a budget with a $20 million deficit. Though it meant maintaining a grueling schedule and giving up more of her personal life, she accepted the challenge and she succeeded, turning the budget around and creating a $14.5 million reserve, all while continuing to teach as a political science professor. At the top, as the second in command at one of the world's premier university, Rice had it made. She had proven herself as an executive. She was already sitting on many corporate boards, and she was in a position to become president of any university in the nation. And so many people might have been surprised when she stepped down as provost and began tutoring George W. Bush, then governor of Texas, on foreign policy. But it was a sacrifice she was willing to make, one that led to her to becoming the national security advisor and then eventually the U.S. Secretary of State. And as I write this, Rice continues to serve in that role. What once looked like a sacrifice has made her more influential than ever. When she completes her term, she could return to teaching with great prestige. There isn't a university in the world that wouldn't want to have her on the political science faculty. She could become president of one of the top universities. She could run for the Senate. She could even run for presidency of the United States. She had been consistently willing to give up and go up, and I have no doubt that she will make whatever sacrifices are necessary to take the next step. And that's what happens when a leader understands and lives by the law of sacrifice. Here's how you can apply the law of sacrifice into your life. First, to become a more influential leader, are you willing to make sacrifices? Are you willing to give up your rights for the sake of the people you lead? Give it some thought. Create 2 lists. The list that you're willing to give up in order to go up, and the things that you're not willing to sacrifice in advance. Be sure to consider which list will maintain items such as your health, marriage, relationships with children, finance, and so on. And number 2, living by the law of sacrifice usually means being willing to trade something of value that you possess to gain something more valuable than you don't. And King gave up many personal freedoms to gain freedoms for others. Rice gave up prestige and influence at Stanford to gain influence and impact around the world. In order to make such sacrificial trades, an individual must have something of value to trade. What do you have to offer? And what are you currently willing to trade your time, energy, and resources for that may give you greater personal worth? What do you have to offer? And what are you currently willing to trade your time, energy, and resources for that may give you greater personal power? Number 3, one of the most harmful mindsets of leaders is what I call destination disease. The idea that they can sacrifice for a season and then arrive. Leaders who think this way stop sacrificing and stop gaining higher ground in leadership. In what areas might you be in danger of having destination disease? Write them down. Then for each, create a statement of ongoing growth that will be an antidote for such thinking. For example, if you have the mindset that you are finished learning once you graduate from school, you may need to write, I will make it my practice to learn and grow in significant areas every year. Interesting. That's how it ends. Awesome. That is the law of sacrifice. I hope you got a lot out of it. We're entering chapter 19, the law of timing, and that is almost the final chapter of this particular book. But that was a really, really great chapter, and I hope that it brought light into maybe something that you may need to, sacrifice now in order to gain momentum and step into what will be what you trade your time, energy, and resources for, what may give you greater personal worth. And that is a question that you must ask yourself consistently. What are you willing to trade? What are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to do in order for you to gain that personal worth, that power that you hold within? What are you willing to do? Ask yourself those questions. That was powerful. I hope you got a lot out of it. Talk to you soon. Have a blessed day.